First off, there's this misnomer or misunderstanding that if you have an LLC, you automatically have these magical tax savings.
So I'm curious how you advise your clients related to setting up their LLCs. And this is going to sound so basic and ridiculous, but I don't care. So when people tell you, oh, you've got to be in either Delaware or Nevada, whatever, whatever. First of all, I don't believe there's any anonymity because people can look you up and figure out who is attached to the LLC. So I feel like it's got to be only like other types of protection. So to spend the money to be LLC set up in one state and then foreign file here and foreign file there because where you live might be different than where you invest. Like, how do you advise people? Because I'm just looking to not waste money, but not be irresponsible either.
That is a great question. That's a question I get all the time from clients. So, the LLC question, first off, there's this misnomer or misunderstanding that if you have an LLC, you automatically have these magical tax savings. I'm here to tell you that doesn't exist. The only additional tax savings that you're going to get from having an LLC is writing off the annual renewal fees. In order to get that, you have to first spend the money. So there are no tax benefits simply because you're using the same tax code, regardless of whether you own something inside of an LLC or not. Really, the LLC is all about liability protection and specifically charging order protection, where charging order protection is if you get sued and if you lose, then whoever essentially wins that lawsuit, they are first in line for taking distributions before you. That's really all the LLC does for you. So from a wealth management and wealth building standpoint, privacy is very important. If they can't find you, it becomes more difficult to sue you. You're absolutely right about regardless of what state you set up this LLC, it is very easy to find out who owns it. I have a good buddy of mine who's a real estate attorney. He's also a title agent here in the Tampa area. And he's like, you have no idea how easy it is. He's like, I can go and within a couple hours, figure out who actually owns a Nevada LLC or a Delaware LLC or a Wyoming LLC. He's like, it's not difficult. It's very, very simple, but people have the illusion that they're hiding there. It's like, if you really want privacy, trusts are best for privacy. If you want liability protection, be properly insured. So talk to your insurance agent, have the proper liability insurance, have the umbrella policy, make sure you're having regular checkups at least once, if not more than once a year with your insurance agent to make sure that you are covered from that standpoint. That's really the advice that I give. And an LLC is not a get out of jail free card. There are no special tax advantages there. And if you are a multi-member LLC, then by default, you are going to be taxed as a partnership, which means you're going to have an additional tax return, a partnership tax return, an additional set of books. There are additional expenses to that. Now, if it's a great big apartment complex, that could definitely be worth it. But if it's a little duplex or three family just down the street, probably a waste of money, just to be honest with you. Until you get to the scale where it really truly makes sense to have that property in an LLC, I say save the money. Just make sure you're protected from a liability standpoint with proper insurance, and that you're just, maybe put it in a trust. Yeah, and then land trusts are particularly good for that.
And then follow up just real quick if I can. Is when you have multiple properties, most guidance I'm hearing is separate LLCs for each property. Is there any
Correct.
circumstance where you would not do that? No.
I would definitely do that for several reasons. Number one is the commingling issue. You definitely don't want to commingle funds. Number two, if you have, let's say, 10 different properties and then 10 different LLCs, and if you want to 1031 a property specifically, you have to 1031 it in the same name. Unless you're actually going to do a drop and swap, which takes a little bit of time, where now you're actually dropping the ownership interests into the individuals from the partnership. That can take potentially up to a year of advanced planning to do that. Um, yeah, really ideally, if you have 10 large properties, you want the 10 different LLCs at that point in time. And then also be careful of what state you're in. Some states, if you're a single member LLC versus multi-member LLC, you may not have charging protection order charging order protection rather, with a single member LLC. Florida is one of those states where multi-member LLCs, it's codified in the state statutes that you do have charging order protection. There was a law case here back in, I think it was 2010 or 2011, that specifically excluded single member LLCs from charging order protection in the state of Florida. So be careful of what state you're in, because there's a handful of other states that are like that.
This is phenomenal. Show fans, we've already
Thank
learned
you so
more in the
much.
last 10 minutes than you expected for the rest of this year. I got a question to follow up, Eric, because you mentioned 10 large buildings should have separate LLCs. At what point, because I have to admit, I have 10 buildings that are all under a single LLC, technically. I have 6 buildings under a single LLC, and then I have 4 other buildings under a separate LLC because I bought them that way.
Mhm.
But let's say the smallest is 17 and 20 units, and then the largest be 80, and next one's 50 and 42. This is a very self-serving question, but at what point does it make sense to go individual LLC? Does it make sense to do that on duplexes, or is there a point where you say, okay, now it makes more sense to have an individual LLC, an individual bank account to that LLC, and the full path of what you do with an LLC back?
I think to a certain extent, it comes down to the level of risk that you're comfortable managing. That's really what it boils down to. How much can you afford to lose or potentially lose? So that would answer your question because, if you're in Cleveland, your price per door could be a lot lower than if you're investing in, let's say, Los Angeles. Uh, radically different there. As far as now with the 6 buildings and 4 buildings, are those on the same site?
No, these are split site properties.
But site properties, okay. Reason I ask is, so one of the larger apartment, uh, you know, people out there, McKinley, a huge corporation, they have tens of thousands of doors all over the country. What they do when they buy a new apartment community, if they have individual buildings, if there are more 15 or more doors in a building, they subdivide actually that parcel of land and put it in its own LLC. So when they have these large properties that are 300, 400, 500 doors, they could potentially have a dozen or more LLCs. And that's something that they've always done because that's what they feel comfortable with, because they feel that from a risk management standpoint, they're better protected that way. Again,
That's
it comes down to
fascinating.
what level are you comfortable with? I mean, they own many, many billions of dollars worth of real estate. So
Absolutely
what
amazing.
is your suitability to risk?
And then own those in an LLC, but then owned by a trust.
Yeah,
Makes sense. I gotta go change everything because I'm own LLC. Walter runs the LLC. Like that's pretty easy to pierce the veil, and I know because I've been sued
mhm.
3 times and they found me every time. So thank you, Eric.
That
Let's give Eric.
single member thing was shocking to me too. Like that's really important to know because like I'd be
Yeah.
tempted to say, let me just form the LLC in the state where the building is because well, I foreign file everywhere. But you're right. Like if you don't have a partner or multi-members, like you have to know that piece.
Very important. Most states will have charge and order protection with the single member LLCs, but Florida is one that specifically does not. There are a few others that either don't, or it's very easy to pierce that veil. So that's something to definitely be cognizant of, depending upon where you're investing.
So are you saying basically each property could be owned in like a land trust, but the land trust is owned by the LLC?
Well, if it's in title of the land trust, you can certainly have an LLC as a beneficiary. That may not be needed though. Yeah, it depends. It's going to all depend on how many doors are there, how many buildings do you have, how much money do you have invested, what level of risk are you comfortable with?
Yeah, I'm gonna
Uh,
set up a call with you. Probably I'll set something up when I get you a hold of your calendar.
okay, yeah,
And
I'd be
so,
happy to
so
do
you
that.
know, Brian, from what I'm gathering from Eric is it's actually LLC can own the property, but what owns the LLC is more important because the LLC is very easy to search. So
Mhm.
closer to the market is fine for that to be searchable, but closer to you, you want that to be a trust because the trust is not searchable. Like, the only person who knows is the actual attorney who wrote the trust, and the only way to find that information is literally to go back to that attorney and figure out who had that, which is complex and difficult to do.
Yeah,
Whereas the LLC,
and
you can
and
go to
he-
the main website and find it.
right. And one thing I will mention on top of that is If your attorney recommends that you name the trust after yourself, you need a new attorney.
Run.
Yeah, exactly. Run. That is a red flag. You know, if your name is Tom Jones and you have the Tom Jones Trust, you know, as soon as you're about to get sued, they don't just search for Tom Jones. They search for Tom Jones Trust, and assets owned by Tom Jones. They also will look for Tom Jones Inc., Tom Jones LLC. It takes an attorney about 60 seconds to do a nationwide search and find out everything that you own. So don't have it in the name of a trust that's named after you. Name it after your dog before you name it after yourself.